Well, this is the final week of our series about calling upon the Lord. And this week, the focus is on calling upon the glory of the Lord, and what I'm going to call the economy of grace. Now, some parables make us smile, right? Some parables make sense, and we nod along with it and go, yeah, I get that. And then there are the ones that make us scratch our heads, like today's parable, right? The steward is accused of wasting the master's possessions. A master demands the books and an accounting. The steward goes out and starts cutting deals with debtors, and then, shockingly, the master commends him. Wait a minute. What is going on? What is it that Jesus is trying to tell his disciples? What is Luke trying to tell us in this accounting? I, and maybe you, expected Jesus to draw a clear line between right and wrong, right? Between faithful and unfaithful. But instead, the more I kept reading this and studying this and praying over it, the lines just continued to be blurred. The steward is accused of dishonesty, but the master praises him anyway. Now, this doesn't fit our categories of comfort and what we know to be true, but maybe that's actually the point. I kept struggling with this parable because I'm like, it's not clean, it's not easy, it isn't tidy, it isn't polar opposites, it's not something that we can just like share with you and you can go on your way today. But I've been wrestling with this one, and then it dawned on me that that was the purpose. That we are being asked to wrestle with a kingdom that doesn't play by the rules that we know. Our first instinct is to see the steward like a character from one of our courtroom dramas or one of our more than healthy headlines about corporate greed or embezzlement, right? We know this type of person. We know this type of crime. They change the books. They hoodwink people that are vulnerable. And they finally get caught, hopefully, and are held accountable. And they go through court, and there's justice at the end. And so as we read this parable, for me at least, and maybe you, I think we look at him with suspicion. What has this steward done? Why is the master coming to him? Why then is his actions, do they look like they're maybe a little dishonest? Do they look like they're going behind his back? I have so many questions. Is he gonna get away with something, or will he be exposed at the end? And we can't quite tell. I kept asking Luke, can you tell me who the bad guy is in this? We don't have any insight what the master is or isn't. We kind of know that there's some actions going on with the steward, but then we don't really lean specifically toward the fact that he is the bad guy. The parable doesn't hand us answers. How do you like that for a sermon today? The parable has no answers that are obvious for you. And it leaves me with more questions, but it also causes us to press deeper, to look deeper than what we just read on the surface, not just at the steward, but then at ourselves and at the way that God is working. Who do we connect with in this parable? Do we connect with the master? Have we been in some kind of circumstance where we had to deliver bad news to someone that worked for us? Are we the steward where we have been faithful and loyal to our master, but yet our master comes to us and accuses us of something and wants an accounting of what he's done? Or maybe we've been someone who's had a lot of debts and we live day to day, every single day, with something we can never catch up with. This whole story keeps shifting. We don't know the motives of anybody. We know the steward's decisions ripple outward beyond him. They don't ripple toward him, but toward the debtors. Their lives are changed. So I thought, let's imagine one of them. Imagine being on the receiving end of this. You owed more than you could ever pay, and the weight of that debt shaped your days, your future, and your hope. And then in a moment, the burden is lifted, and you don't really know why. All you know is you have been given relief, and you are grateful to those who have given you grace. So you look to the steward who's given you this good news, and you then look to the steward's master, and you're grateful for his generosity and kindness and compassion. That all seems to make a little bit more sense if we look at it from that viewpoint. But then comes the strangest part of all of this parable. The master commends the steward for going and doing this. Now, I struggle because it talked about his shrewdness and prudence and all these things, and I'm like, what does this actually mean? Why is he praising him? It is so bizarre. This doesn't feel like a message that Jesus would give to his disciples. Kind of like we were talking the one Sunday where we're like, why should you hate your mother and father? And that's not what the case was, right? In all of this, what I expected was the master to come back and to punish his steward, to tighten the control around him, to make an example of him. But instead, the master blesses what looks like loss because it's revealed something greater than wealth. It has glorified the master. It has brought honor to the master to be generous, to be seen as merciful. And that's the moment where we can lean into the parable a little bit more and ask, well, what now? If we look at the master as merciful, what does this really mean? And maybe that's why Luke leaves this parable so open, so vague, and hard to pin down. He isn't giving us a clear villain because there isn't one. Because when we actually look at this, and we know that this is Jesus teaching his disciples, and we know that he's trying to give them some wisdom for when he is no longer there with them, then we need to look through this parable through the lens of Christ. And Christ was great about telling stories about what was coming, but hiding it in a story like this. You see, the master is not greedy or cruel, but generous. The steward is not scheming or selfish, but loyal, and even the debtors are not condemned, but relieved, reconciled, and restored. The whole parable is about grace. It's not a story about dishonesty or wealth or money. It's a story about God's grace, God's glory, and it breaking into the world, jolting us, really. It's a radical reversal. This parable was always about the reconciliation of the people, the villagers, to the steward and to the master. Now follow with me. It's hard to see this, but we are the debtors. We are the debtors who have a debt so high that we can't possibly ever pay. And it is Jesus who is the steward who comes to us to relieve us of our debt. And Jesus knows his master. His master knows his steward. They know what's going on. This isn't about wealth and day-to-day transactions or ledgers or employees. This is about our understanding of a God who sent Jesus, the Son of God, here as his steward, as our picture of who God is, so that we could understand that when he relieves our debt from us, that we have a generous God. We have a generous God. We have a God who we then can glorify and bring honor to, like the villagers did to their master. Did that make, are you coming with me on that? That's kind of the short version of an entire week of what I've been wrestling with. Because it didn't make any sense. None of this made any sense. And I couldn't figure out what it was. But it's an illustration that Jesus wants his disciples to know. He wants them to know that they will become the stewards of the holy message, of the gospel, of the truth that the Master, the God the Father, and the Son of God have given them. And they now need to go out into the world and share it with everyone, to relieve them of the debt, of the burden, of the heaviness, to be reconciled and forgiven for something they could never repay anyway. So this is about that connection. Now, I wish Jesus had just said that. Wouldn't that have been easier? Right? Amen to that, right? But that's what he's trying to share with us. And because we live in a world of ledgers, I think that's why he was trying to share that example, so that we could kind of understand this and then kind of figure out, well, why is this happening? We live in a world where debts must be paid, where fairness is demanded, and we divide people into winners or losers. But this is not the end of this story for the parable. This is instead an invitation to live in an economy not of wealth, but in an economy of grace, extending grace always forward to the next person you meet, extending grace in a situation where someone doesn't deserve to be forgiven, where a debt doesn't deserve to be removed, but it is. You have the power to do those things, to impact the world in a way that is shocking to people, that will jolt them and think, what in the world are you doing? Why are you doing this? Because you have been shown grace from God. Because I have been shown grace from God. I have been forgiven and reconciled. And so I need to turn around and give that same kind of grace out to people over and over and over and over until my last dying breath, so that people will see what God looks like through my actions, God willing. God willing, right? So now that we have that and we understand, or at least we have a little bit better understanding of this parable and what it means to us, our calling is to live in such a way that God's glory is made visible in us, in the relationships that we make with the gifts that we've been given in this life. And when we say in the Lord's Prayer, forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors, now you know why. Forgive us our debts, oh God, as we now turn and we forget our debtors. Forgiveness and grace. Forgiveness and grace. This is an economy that we live on, that is part of our guiding principle. It's an economy based on God's grace shared with the world to glorify God. Forgive us our debts. as we forgive our debtors. Will you be in prayer with me? Glorious God, you have entrusted us with your mission and lifted the debts we could never repay. Teach us to live as stewards of your grace, to glorify you in our generosity and to reflect your glory in all we do. Through Christ who glorified you in life and death and resurrection. Amen.